Okay, let's unpack this. In a world where, things often feel pretty uncertain, understanding how to secure your own financial future, or some might put it, how to make dough, well, it feels more vital than ever. Today, we're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating insights. They come from a recent YouTube transcript, Clif High, Sci-Fi World, and it explores a very particular viewpoint on the current state of the world and, importantly, what that means for your personal sustainability.
Yeah, what's particularly compelling, I think, is how this source frames our current global situation. It's not just calling it challenging, it's describing it as a silent war, one with these huge cascading impacts on, well, pretty much every aspect of our lives, from national stability right down to, whether you can get certain goods and services. So our mission today is really to extract the core ideas from this perspective and help you understand how you might apply them, or at least think about them, as you navigate these unsettled times.
Absolutely. And we'll get into everything from where the supposed war started, according to the source, to some really surprising connections it makes with the 1970s economy. And maybe most importantly, some specific strategies it suggests for building what it calls your woo, which seems to mean personal resilience and independence. Okay, so to really understand this source's view on, personal sustainability, we first need to grasp its core premise, this idea that we're living through a silent war. Can you unpack what that actually means according to this perspective? And crucially, when does it think this all kicked off?
Right. So this source attributes what it calls the silent war to a biological attack or a bioweapon release. It specifically pinpoints July of 2019, and its central claim, which is quite extraordinary, is that this event instantly shifted Earth into an entirely different dimension, basically radically changing everything. The transcript suggests it actually took a lot of people several months to even recognize that something profound was supposedly happening.
Wow. Okay, a different dimension. And this silent war, it's not just some vague idea, is it? The source argues it has very real, concrete, cascading economic consequences. How does it connect that perceived conflict to our day-to-day finances?
Precisely. Yeah, this viewpoint states that war, even a silent one like this, inherently increases risk at the national stability level, which in turn profoundly affects currency and, the basic functioning of human support systems.
Yeah.
It talks about cascading and interlocking effects stemming from this initial biological attack.
Yeah.
It uses an example like if a hairdresser can't get hair dye, then you simply can't get your hair dyed. Simple as that. It's presented as a slow-moving process, almost like swimming in molasses.
Yeah.
And the source suggests it's going to take years, potentially, to fully wake up the population to this new reality it describes.
Okay, swimming in molasses, that paints a picture. And it sounds like it wasn't accidental. Who does the source actually point the finger at? Who is responsible for engineering the silent war?
Well, according to this transcript, it identifies the globalists and the CCP. They're named as the ones attacking us and deliberately engineering all of this instability. And their intent, it suggests, is to force us into the new Great Reset, echoing, Klaus Schwab's vision. And just to clarify, for this source, the Great Reset seems to refer to a global restructuring of society and economy, one designed to diminish individual autonomy and really centralize control. So the whole situation is presented as this kind of slow breakdown, a slow burn. Although it does also consider the possibility of some sudden dramatic event, something that could accelerate public awareness, maybe a major political revelation or something like that. It certainly paints a vivid picture, doesn't it? Even if it's an unsettling one.
It really does. And with such a, foundational shift described, it makes sense that the source then turns its attention to how this impacts our money, our dough, as it calls it, and your personal financial sustainability. This war, in its view, directly impacts the availability of goods and services, leading to what it calls compounding shortages. So what implications does it draw from this? How should we be thinking about money itself?
Right, this is key. The transcript introduces the concept of a sound money economy. And it states that we are, in fact, already in this moment. We're there now. For this perspective, sound money is very specifically identified. It's things like gold, silver, and certain cryptocurrencies. Assets that it argues hold, inherent value or are resistant to inflation, unlike traditional fiat currencies. These sound monies, the source claims, are currently battling it out with, or at least drawing problems for, what it calls debt instruments. And it specifically mentions FERNs, which is its shorthand for Federal Reserve notes, basically the U.S. dollar. The transcript actually describes these FERNs as dying, suggesting they're rapidly losing their purchasing power, and it blames systemic issues like national instability and captured institutions, which, according to this viewpoint, are the reasons why nothing is functioning within our country.
That distinction between types of money, sound of money versus dying instruments, it's interesting. And it draws this comparison to the past, specifically highlighting the 1970s. How does it compare that era's hyperinflation to what it thinks we might face now?
Yeah, it makes a direct comparison.
Mm-hmm.
It points out that the 1970s hyperinflation happened, after the U.S. went off the gold standard in '71. But it highlights a key difference back then. Many people had fixed interest rate mortgages, often really low rates, like 3–6%. And crucially, their wages were escalating at the same time. So even though prices were rising, people could sort of feel great, relatively speaking. However, the source warns that today is very different, with so many variable rates out there, and what it describes as the inability to raise interest rates at all without completely crashing the system. Any hyperinflation now, it predicts, will disproportionately squeeze individuals. Because, it argues, wages simply will not compensate for the underlying hyperinflation.
Okay, so a much tougher scenario, potentially. And with this picture of dying currency and potential hyperinflation, does this source make any specific, maybe stark predictions about how this will actually play out in everyday life? Like, for instance, with something basic like fuel prices?
It does make some pretty stark claims, yes. The source anticipates things like $15, $18, $25 a gallon for diesel, and potentially just the unavailability of gasoline altogether in the near future.
Right.
It also points to Venezuela as a kind of case study, a country whose currency has devalued so dramatically that its population is basically forced to operate outside the official currency system as much as they possibly can. And this, it explains, is what it looks like when you're trying to cope with a system of dead instruments,
Right.
money that just has no purchasing power anymore.
Wow. That definitely paints a daunting picture, no doubt about it. But the source doesn't just stop at outlining the problems, right? It offers some very specific strategies for individuals, things you can do, which it refers to as building your woo. It's a wonderfully unconventional term, isn't it, for personal resilience, self-reliance? What's the core advice there? How do you cultivate this woo?
Woo is memorable. The central idea presented is basically to remove yourself from the system that is causing the problems, and instead become more self-actualizing, independent, and standing in your own integrity outside their system. Right. This involves seizing control of the environment, your immediate environment, and crucially, putting the time into yourself, not into their system, investing in you.
Right, removing yourself from the system. That leads directly to some practical advice it gives, doesn't it? What it calls the 10% rule. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, exactly. The force strongly suggests dedicating 10% of your energy, your time, and everything, your resources, to invest that in yourself. And it emphasizes that this 10% should primarily be focused on education, specifically learning about sound money, understanding, how gold and silver have always been sound money, and learning to differentiate them from the ferns, the dollars. It does say you can start smaller, even with just 1%, but the absolute key is consistent investment in your own self-education, which, as the source claims, makes you hugely more powerful relative to your own environment.
And it gives a very direct piece of advice about wages, too, something you should do immediately.
It really does. It's quite specific.
Yeah.
The source advises getting your wages paid in cash, if possible, specifically on a Friday, and then immediately using that cash to convert to sound money that day. It warns against waiting even until Saturday or Monday, because it suggests there could be potential ritual devaluations that might happen over a weekend.
Convert immediately. Okay. Beyond converting wages, what does this viewpoint say about, like, traditional jobs or finding opportunities in this new environment it describes?
Well, it doesn't necessarily advise against having a job, not exactly, but it strongly suggests that you're going to be far better off if you are investing in your own education.
Yep.
It actually encourages you to hire yourself, in a way, to investigate and try some of the opportunities that your education has shown to you. Yep. The transcript asserts that the largest area of opportunity will be local. It's about reinventing yourself to solve problems. Because in its words, we're going to have nothing but problems for years and years. So opportunity lies in solving those problems.
Problems as opportunities. And it backs this up with a really vivid story, doesn't it? An anecdote about a baker, which seems to illustrate this idea of self-reliance through skill. What's the story there?
Yeah, it's a great little story. It tells of this man who can apparently travel anywhere on the planet, even without official documents. And he can make a living just by baking bread, because he carries the knowledge, the skill right there in his head. He gives specifics like knowing the exact measurements. 500 grams of flour, 8 grams of salt, 7 grams of yeast, and 350 grams of water for a loaf. And his method is simple. He goes to restaurants, offers to bake for them just in exchange for a meal. And invariably, the story goes, he walks out not just with a meal, but with a job offer and an advance payment. It really demonstrates how investing in your own practical skills provides this immense portable value, highlighting that, it works because you eat it. It's a fundamental need.
That's powerful. So it really boils down to seeing opportunity where others just see problems, and critically, having the skills, the knowledge to actually act on those opportunities.
Exactly. And this perspective suggests approaching this whole process with a maybe surprisingly fun attitude. Because the idea is you're fundamentally going to change your life, you're going to grow, you're going to expand. It also encourages learning to read for content, don't read for headlines, dig deeper, and applying whatever education you gain directly to your existing skill sets. Build on what you already know.
Okay, so we've certainly covered a lot today, from a radically different interpretation of, well, everything happening globally,
Yeah.
to some very concrete steps for personal empowerment. The source's perspective seems clear. It proposes we're in a silent war, one that's leading to unprecedented economic challenges, but also implies that navigating this, maybe even winning it in some sense, involves a pretty fundamental transformation for humanity, for the planet.
Yeah, I think the core takeaway, the call to action for you, the listener, is really clear. Invest in yourself, primarily through education, to gain that sound money knowledge, yes, but also the practical skills you might need. Skills for navigating a future where traditional systems, at least according to this viewpoint, may no longer be reliable. It's fundamentally about building self-reliance and, maybe crucially, spotting opportunities in the very problems that emerge around you.
So this isn't just about, hunkering down and weathering a storm. It's presented as being about fundamentally changing your relationship with the world around you, seizing control, in a way, of your own path through whatever is coming. As you consider everything we've discussed in this deep dive, maybe ask yourself this. What specific area of knowledge or what practical skill can you invest your 10% into starting today to begin building your own